G'day ladies and gentlemen, it's Brendan O'Connell, the Bell Tower Boy, live from, well not really live, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It is the 4th of January 2018 and yes, I made it back alive from New Zealand. I'll touch on that briefly. I've been very sick. I've done an interview with Dr. Kevin Barrett and I did an interview with Daniel Walker of Activist News Australia. I was lucky to do anything at all. I was feeling that ill, but anyway, after the 2-week hunger strike didn't do me too much good in New Zealand. I just want to round it off by saying I am entering into a private discussion with the relevant minister on what went on in New Zealand. Suffice to say, New Zealand is not my enemy, nor is New Zealand your enemy. New Zealand is the enemy of Israel, as Benjamin Netanyahu so eloquently said not that long ago that New Zealand had declared war on Israel with its stand in the United Nations. God bless New Zealand and all who sail on it. 4 million people. It's got a few things to fix, isolated down there in the South Pacific, most notably its prison system. Number one, bad. And number two, you don't lock up asylum seekers in high security prisons. Nobody does it except you, New Zealand. And how you've been getting away with this, I don't know. We'll leave it at that. God willing, the new government of Jacinda Ardern, a very Democrat style, it's a Labor government, socialist type government, will be dedicating itself to other social justice issues other than gay rights and transgender rights, which seems to be its forte.
Oh, gay. Actually, Nigel, that's not gay at all. It's deeply disappointing, but it's not gay.
Hey?
Look, bro, unless that pie is a man who loves another man, then it's not gay.
Or a woman who loves another woman.
Thank you, Muzzer. Steve's gay.
Steve's not gay. Steve, you're not gay, are you?
Quite gay.
And move into other rights as well, more than equally deserving. Okay, New Zealand, I know you can do it. And thank God for Lorde, young Ella, 21 years old, who told Israel to go to hell. She would not play, the pop star Lorde will not play in Israel. It just so happens that the gentleman who invited me down, Chris, a very well-connected man, 70 years old, is very good friends with Ella's auntie and was screaming to her auntie about me. And, you know, coincidence maybe, at the same time she doesn't go to Israel. Who knows? It's a nice thought anyway. It's my fantasy and I'm entitled to it. What is this about? I put the title of this is Benjamin Netanyahu, the most powerful man in the world. And alternatively is Vladimir Putin getting up there too. Of course, Putin is the rock star for many, but I think it's time you stop giving money to people who are lying to you. Let's host straight into the strong relationship between Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin and quit the garbage that Putin is in the Middle East for anything other than to service the new China-led City of London One Belt, One Road project, which will have a port sitting in the Mediterranean in the current state of Israel, coincidentally. Let's get stuck into some articles. You will, of course, remember a video I did a few months back, 6 months ago, called Russia and Israel Steal US Tech, Tel Aviv Booms. Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu, under the Telpiot program, which many say is irrelevant, which is exactly the way Israel rules, is, of course, stealing US high technology and giving it to Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin also then hands it on to elements of Iran, and of course, China and India are in there too, and we'll talk about that in a second. The fact that Israel continues to shaft the United States, and in the articles to follow, basically give the finger like this, the bird, to the United States, saying, we don't have you anymore, we're going to team up with Putin, and we're going to run the Middle East with him. And all the while, the Putin group is just screaming how wonderful it is. I used to be a Putin groupie. Just by simple logic and looking at all the available information, I'll show you that both Putin and Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church are nothing but KGB agents in new garb, playing the game, sons of the City of London, working together. Putin, Trump and Netanyahu, and now China and India are on board in the huge One Belt, One Road project with an immediate payout of $100 billion US going into immediate infrastructure, but it will run into the trillions. And this is what Israel is seeking to dominate. So here are some news articles. Let's talk about them right now. Here are some of my favourites. Here from an article from The Week, a sort of a Breitbart, but based in the UK. Why Russia should take over Israel's defence from America. Let's talk. For moral, historic and strategic reasons, the United States has Israel's back. Israel is the top recipient of US foreign aid and it has access to top-flight US weapons. Yes, its neighbours could only dream of, and that's the Telpiot program. Probably most importantly, the US, the world's sole superpower, is known as Israel's chief defender both militarily and at the United Nations. Making sure Israel is safe is a sacred, bipartisan, inviolable cornerstone of American foreign policy. But is it really so important that America be the nation that provides the protection? Cutting straight to the chase, the obvious choice is Russia. Russia isn't the global superpower it used to be, but it's no slouch. Russian President Vladimir Putin's driving goal seems to be making Russia great again, feared or respected on the world stage, and that has involved putting ample resources towards building the country's military might on top of its large arsenal of nuclear missiles. If Russia signed on, Israel could be assured of advanced weapons and enough nuclear backup to scare the daylights out of even the most hostile nation or non-state group. There are lots of reasons for the improved ties between Russia and Israel, but key among them is the fact that Israel has become increasingly Russian in the past 20 years. Many of these million or so members of the ex-Soviet diaspora will speak Russian, hang out with other Russian emigres, read Russian language newspapers and frequent businesses that cater to Russian Israelis. About a third of them, 300,000, are considered Jewish by Israel's law of return, meaning they have at least one Jewish grandparent, but not by Israeli religious authorities, meaning they can't get married or buried in Israel, even though they are citizens. Putin and Israel's government also share a hardline stance. Now listen to this, Putin and Israel's government also share a hardline stance towards Islamic insurgencies and terrorism. Russia has been considered relatively pro-Palestinian, but Putin is notably more sympathetic to Israel's Palestinian crackdowns than his predecessors. Similarly, Israel declined to join the US and Europe in criticising Putin's harsh crackdown on Chechen Muslim militants, even though his incursions into Georgia and Ukraine. Is that enough to convince Russia to become Israel's patron? Perhaps not, but there are other incentives, chief among them money and prestige. Putin desperately wants Russia to be a world power again, to be consequential and at the centre of global decisions. The country that protects Israel is guaranteed a seat at the table when it comes to many of the biggest, most high-profile challenges in the global arena. Extending protection to Israel makes as much or more sense than hosting the Winter Olympics in a temperate Black Sea resort town or, allegedly, bribing its way to hosting the World Cup. Financially, Russia is struggling with the low oil prices and Western sanctions, and it's keenly looking for new markets for its armaments. Israel is a generous customer with a large defence budget. Let me tell you, the weapons are going one way though. Israel doesn't need anything from Russia, technologically speaking. Israel's got all the hot stuff, straight out of DARPA. Cutting straight to the chase in this article, read it yourself. And while Russia hasn't been a very active player in the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, the US seems to have run out of steam as lead intermediary. Perhaps Moscow, given its historical support for the Palestinians, would be viewed by both sides as an honest broker. Barring that, listen to this, Israel could at least have a freer hand, i.e. kill more Muslim men, women and children, to intervene militarily in the Palestinian territories without concern that its main global patron would criticise it on human rights grounds. Geez, you've got to love that passage. Finally, Israel and the US have a long, close friendship, but as the band Chicago says, everybody needs a little time away. There's no need to consciously uncouple entirely. Russia and Israel are already friendly, at least in a casual way, and the US wouldn't become Israel's enemy. But if anyone would benefit from a Middle East alignment, there's no need to stay together for nostalgia's sake. US policy on Israel has been remarkably steady for decades, but it isn't carved in a stone tablets. Thanks for coming. And speaking of that massive immigration of Russian Jews, most of whom aren't even Jewish, I might add, don't even qualify remotely under the law of return under Jewish halakha, religious law, let's quickly go here to this, one of my favourite articles, all the way back from 2011, 17th of August 2011, from the Guardian newspaper. Listen to this. Israel's former Soviet immigrants transform adopted country. Russian-speaking Jews who arrived over the past 20 years had integrated little, but influenced everything from culture to politics. I urge you to read that article in its entirety. Every single paragraph is important, but what's it basically saying? It's basically saying that Russian Jews, or Russians pretending to be Jews, have taken over Israeli politics, the Israeli high technology sector, and of course now the US as Lockheed have kindly landed the F-35 stealth fighter directly into the hands of Russian technicians who dominate the high technology sector. So why don't you just land the damn thing in Red Square? Because that's what you've done with Israel. And that's an important point to take up with your local congressman. I urge you to ring up the Department of Homeland Security or leave an email stating that US high tech is now in the hands of Russia. That technology will then be transferred to places like communist China. All right. Remember that one. So I urge you to read that article in its entirety. It's an incredible article. Israel's former Soviet immigrants transform adopted country. How about this from 22nd of January 2015? Borscht Belt. These are all new online Jewish journals for Jews, written by Jews for Jews. Borscht Belt. Will Israel spurn America for Russia? For most of last year, the West struggled to find Anyway, go and read it yourself. I'm not going to read it. Borscht Belt. Will Israel spurn America for Russia? Article after article after article detailing how Netanyahu is getting into bed with Putin. The man who's going to save the Middle East. Give me a break. Come on, I can't believe we're still having this debate. Here's one of my favourites from July 10th, 2017. Israel and the unexpected New World Order. Geographically, Israel is just off centre. Why then is it treated with such respect? Well, that's a Telpiot program. They kill switched everyone, but anyway. Especially by the likes of Russia and China. Hello? Hello? Go and read that entire article. It's talking about the One Belt, One Road project to do with China, how it's going to run through into Israel, how Israel will be supplying most of the high technology. Go and read it. If this doesn't get you angry, remember Trump? Best mates with Netanyahu. Trump is going to save American industry. That Trump. Have a look at this one. In Beijing, Netanyahu looks to marry Israel's technology with China's capacity. You can't make this stuff up. Go and read it. I'm not going to read it. Go and read it. Basically, they're bragging massive technology transfers to China. Remember Alex Jones? The Communist Chinese. We're going to fight the Communist Chinese. Well, Alex, your best mate, Donald Trump, is in bed with Netanyahu, who's in bed with Putin, who's in bed with Communist China. How do you work that one out?
Speaking of worse by the minute, Communist China is absolutely allied with the left and many globalists in this country. And they are now militarily expanding all over the world. They've got 97% of rare earth minerals that we've just strategically let them have, the Panama Canal. This has all been the globalist sellout of the country. And joining us, published by Regnery, is Stephen W. Mosier, Bully of Asia, the new book. And, of course, he's one of the top journalists and experts on China, highly recognized out there, pop.org. I'm not going to go over his whole... to get into just China, their stance, what they're doing, what the mindset is of the communist authoritarian regime that controls 1,300,000,000 people. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Alex. The global elitists want us to go quietly into that good night. They want to use Chinese serfs, Chinese slave labor to produce cheap goods, which they import into this country. And, of course, millions of American workers have been unemployed as a result. But the point I want to make, and in fact the point I make in Bully of Asia, is this is all part of an effort concerted with and, in fact, in many ways led by the People's Republic of China. People need to understand in the United States that China declared war on us back in 1991. Now, you didn't hear about this, but you're hearing about it now. And what I mean by that is when the Soviet Union collapsed, Deng Xiaoping said to his comrades, the old Cold War is over, America won, but the new Cold War is now beginning between China and America, and China, the Middle Kingdom, is going to win this one and become the dominant power on the planet.
And they admit it's economic. I mean, you're the expert, but they even said then we're going to flood them with bad drugs, legal drugs, prescription drugs, opiates, stuff 10 times stronger than Oxycontin. They brag about what they're doing, and they found lots of accomplices in our government.
Well, they did. I mean, China's been at war with us ever since. They've been stealing our intellectual property, stealing our factories and jobs, opposing us internationally, warring against us in cyberspace, making these amazing territorial claims to the South China Sea. In a saner time, claiming the entire South China Sea would be an act of war. And we went to the Hague Tribunal and said, tell China to stop. And the Hague Tribunal said, stop. And Xi Jinping, the new Red Emperor of China, Xi Jinping, the president of China, the head of the military, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, says the Hague Tribunal's ruling on the South China Sea is nothing more than waste paper, toilet paper. And that's how China regards all international law. They are not going to be bound by the current international system. They're going to violate it in every way they can to profit themselves. That's what's been happening for the last 20 years. And finally, at long last, I think we have a president who understands this and is willing to seriously take on China. I think that's good for America, and it'll be good for our future if we can simply carry out his policies.
That's all the American taxpayer high technology money, $600 billion plus a year, probably closer to $1 trillion in the black budget. That's all your technology being handed by Benjamin Netanyahu to your economic and military competitors. Are you angry yet down at the Pentagon, Marine headquarters? Anybody? Hello? Here's another one. China's tech money heads for Israel as US welcome wanes. Yeah, again, go and read it. Just go and read it. I'm not going to stand here reading it. Go and have a read. Putin lovers. Putin's going to save us. Putin's a friend of the United States. You know, and let's not forget India. India, Israel expand cooperation from defence to science, agriculture and technology. They're not just doing it with India. They're doing it with everybody, including Australia. You name it. Asia Pacific and even, would you believe, New Zealand. But I've been getting some very good response from ministers in charge of the intelligence community there and the Minister for Defence. After the bear hug, 7 deals signed by PM Modi and Israel. That's the Prime Minister of India. Go and read it. This is all to do with the One Belt, One Road, and I'm going to end very briefly for all you Putin groupies. Igor Sechin, head of Rosneft, is powerful as never before. Go and read it. Basically, that's Putin's best buddy, another Russian Jew oligarch. They're all the same oligarchs, different face, same procedure, all in bed with Netanyahu, completely taken over the Middle East. Remember this warning by a Russian commentator? This is from Putin's Russia, the documentary from 2008.
И более того, мы развиваем свой ядерный комплекс сдерживания. Как вы знаете, недавно провели испытания новых систем баллистического оружия. В позапрошлом году успешно проведены испытания таких боевых комплексов, которых пока нет и вряд ли раньше нас появятся на вооружении других стран мира.
We could see the world in 5 or 10 years when the Middle East is dominated by Iran, with Russia in background. When Americans are pushed out, humiliated, kicked.
There you go. And what's happened? That was 2008, we're now in 2018. 10 years later, and look what's happened. When are you going to work it out? Stop giving money to people who are lying to you. And I'm talking about those big players out there who are lying. They are worshipping Putin. I Googled these articles. These articles are 6 months old. I Googled them in 15 minutes flat. 15 minutes flat. They're everywhere. Go and have a look. Just Google Israel, Netanyahu, Putin, contracts, friendship, Israel, Russia, contracts. You'll find them. They're completely taken over the oil and gas industry, and on and on and on and on and on. Okay, that should wet your whistle. Thanks to Nick, Spiro and others. Productions with voiceovers, with a whole host of people.